Representative New is on the way for the subcommittee and will be here in a minute, but I'd like to call on Representative Silcox to deliver the invocation for this subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please bow. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this committee and for everyone here that's committed to serving the state of Georgia for its very best. Give us wisdom beyond our normal capacity and give us strength. For all these things, I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
All right. Giving a to fill in the time, we're going to have Representative New present her bill, House Bill 896, in the subcommittee, and just giving a preview on the committee hearing that will occur immediately after that Chairman Gunter will chair. We've got House Bill 628 recommitted from the Rules Committee with a slight change. We have House Bill 1017, the Squatter Reform Act. We have House Bill 1153 by Representative Todd Jones, the Homeowners Protection Act. We have House Bill 1203 from Representative Trey Kelly about evictions and use of off-duty sheriffs, constables, marshals, and other officials. And we probably will take those out of order due to the need for one of us to present a bill briefly, hopefully briefly, across the street in the CLOB. So that's a preview of the next meeting, and we'll stand in recess for a few minutes while Representative New makes her way to the committee room.
You ready? Come on.
Yes. I am so sorry.
Representative New, tell us about House Bill 896.
Thank you. It would be my honor to talk about HB 896.
And we are working off of LC 570061S.
Yes.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
working on this some more since last time.
And I appreciate you guys being patient with me because it has been a moment to cultivate this baby of mine. So this bill would streamline the process for individuals who, after a divorce is final, and did not change their name back to their maiden name or birth certificate name at that time, would be able to do so by cutting costs, time, paperwork for those individuals, simply just trying to get back to their identity. Currently, to go back to your birth certificate last name, you would go to Superior Court, pay the fees, which in my county is $250 is where it starts. You would run an ad in the paper for 4 weeks for an additional fee. You'd go back to Superior Court after all of that documentation, bring all of that back in, then wait for the judge to either call it or sign off on it. I had a friend who went through this process. It took her over 8 months to go back to her birth certificate name. It shouldn't be this hard. This is an old law. It needs to be updated. All this just to go back to a name you've always been associated with. If you were to marry Mr. Smith tomorrow in my county, you could pay $56 and change your name tomorrow. All without waiting, all without an ad, to a name that you've never been associated with. So HB 896 proposes a person goes to Superior Court in their county, fill out the paperwork, pay a minimum fee, and the Superior Court would record it, and you could go back to your birth certificate name. And that's it. It's cheaper, faster, and there's no ad.
Thank you, Representative New. And right now, I do not see any questions for the sponsor.
Thank you.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Thank you, Representative New.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll stand in recess for the full committee in just a moment.
Thank you.
All right, so
Do this bill again.
All right, now we're convening the full committee, even though we have the same people in here. All right, calling House Bill 896. Committee has heard the testimony from the subcommittee. All right, no further discussion on the bill. All those in favor of passage say aye. All those opposed? Your bill passes. It'll go to rules. There's a form you're going to have to fill out, and we have it here.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. All right, let's call House Bill 628.
Oh,
That's Reeves. I'm sorry.
Do 1017.
He told me to hold that one.
Okay.
All right, so then we go to House Bill 1153.
He's not here yet.
Anybody here? No?
And Trey Kelly's not here for 12
And Trey's not here for that. 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4.
5.
Yep, we got 5. Well, we'll be in recess till we get somebody here to talk about a bill.
While you're in recess, I want to remind you of the
All right, Representative Seabaugh, are you ready to go forward on House Bill 1017?
I'm ready.
All right. Tell us what your bill does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, for this hearing on House Bill 1017, referred to as the Squatter Reform Act. I'm looking at LC 481175S. As you know, squatting has become a major issue in Georgia, depriving property and landowners of their personal property rights, causing financial hardship, financial loss, and even causing some property owners to file for bankruptcy. And according to some sources, Georgia has become the #1 state for squatting, a statistic we're not proud of. The people of Georgia deserve better, and that is what brings us here today. Before I continue, I want to thank my co-sponsors, Representative Matt Reeves and Deborah Silcox, my good friend, former Attorney General Sam Owens, for their work on this bill. I also want to thank Legislative Counsel Holly Carter, who has the patience of Job. We have worked on this collectively, and we believe we've come up with a good bill that will help Georgians that are being wronged. My co-sponsors are here today to answer questions should you decide to start using that big lawyer language as I go through this. So House Bill 1017 revises Georgia Code to help property owners keep what is rightfully theirs by redefining statute, speeding up the eviction proceedings, charging illegal squatters with a high misdemeanor of criminal trespass, demand possession and removal, and make them pay fines and or confine them to jail. On page 2 of the bill, section 2, line 35, we're revising code section 16721 by adding that a person commits the offense of criminal trespass when he or she intentionally, starting at line 35(1)D, enters upon the land or premise and resides in such land or premise for any period of time without the knowledge or consent of the owner, rightful occupant, or unauthorized or authorized representative of the owner. For the purpose of this code, the term reside means to inhabit, occupy, live on or within any land premise. On page 2, line 39, 2A of section 2, defines what will happen if they are in violation of section 1D stated above, which in summary states They have 3 days to submit a properly executed lease or rental agreement for the property. On page 3, line 44, 2B of section 2 defines what will happen if they are unable to provide a lease or rental agreement. In a summary, that states the individual will be subject to arrest for criminal trespass, in addition to the charge of a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature, as in Code Section 1710-4, shall be subject to demand for possession and removal as provided in Code Section 44-7-50. Continuing on page 3, line 58, it defines the penalty for a squatter as a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature. On page 4, section 3, we're changing the venue of dispossessory proceedings from Superior Court to Magistrate Court. On line 80 to 94, addresses enforcement of the writ of a writ of possession, and in summary, the sheriff, marshal, or like officer shall remove the persons or their personal property or both from the premise within 7 days after the time of the appeal of the writ of possession ordered by the court. And on page 5, section 4 states if the trial finds a verdict for the plaintiff, the clerk of court shall issue a writ of possession and a FIFA for the cost of the proceedings. And in section 5, we're making the change effective upon the governor's signature, because this is a big problem that needs to be addressed immediately and not wait until July. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Representative Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On lines 58 and 60, we're suggesting or would be enacting with this legislation if we were to pass it, that the violator would be guilty of a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature. And I was wondering if you could tell me, because I don't practice criminal law, and we normally don't get these criminal offense bills in this committee. What is the penalty? What is the fees or the time in jail for something like that? And if you could help me understand why you decided, or whoever decided, to go with misdemeanor of high and aggravated nature as opposed to a regular misdemeanor or something else.
Sure. So, misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature is a person convicted of a misdemeanor, punished by a fine of not to exceed $5,000, or by confinement in the county or other jail or county correctional institution not to exceed 12 months. And we wanted this penalty to be harsh because these are criminals. They're stealing from property owners, or stealing personal property. They're causing financial damages, and they're causing property damages. We want to make the penalty fit the crime.
Thank you.
Representative Oliver?
Forgive me for my confusion. We have 3 squatter bills here, and I'm trying to put them all together in my head. And we already have, tell me where in the statute currently there is a provision about squatters, removing squatters, and why does the current provision not work?
The current squatter provision is a civil matter. So if someone comes in and squats in your home, you have to go through the eviction process. It could take 8 to 12 months to get somebody out.
We have the criminal violation exists today for trespass for a squatter. But what the purpose of this is, and first of all, Mr. Chairman, we do have a real problem with squatters. I'm very aware of that. But the purpose of this is to further narrow the definition, specify the definition of squatters, to make criminal trespass more available as a criminal option for the landlord. Is that the intent of this?
Yeah, so we want to make it criminal trespassing so that we can remove them from the property sooner than then we can do that through the civil process.
And you're combining, though, a process here. The citation is used, if they come up with some kind of lease, that's presented when and where? At the criminal matter? That's what I'm trying to figure out. You've got kind of an affirmative defense here after they get a notice of this criminal citation. I mean, the sheriff doesn't go out and arrest them because they've gotta have notice and an opportunity to say, present a document. So it turns from a criminal to a civil. Am I totally missing this, or is that what we're doing here?
I'll defer to my co-counsel on that.
Yes. That is what we're doing, yes.
And so this will be handled by I go in and I ask for a criminal warrant against a squatter. And I have to prove that I've given notice to the squatter, and so a magistrate judge issuing the criminal warrant is where I am, where this process is set out. And if I show service on the squatter, is that personal service of the citation, of the, just trying to figure out. You gotta have personal service on a tenant, but you
Right.
don't have to have personal service on a squatter, you can just,
Again, because it's a criminal violation.
yeah.
Did you say 7 days and then they have a 7-day appeal period?
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
So walk me through it. I go to the magistrate court judge and I show him, her, that I've issued notice to the squatter.
Correct.
And then that's what I have to do to get a criminal warrant. And the squatter will have to know that I'm going to the magistrate court judge to bring in his, her documentation.
I would assume that you give them notice, and then they would have to give, if they had a lease, they would have to give that back to the owner or the owner's representative. And that would, of course,
That isn't-
negate.
That doesn't tell me when the judge is gonna make a decision whether the squatter's document is good or not. And I don't know when the squatter who gets this, I'm probably totally misreading this, cause I hadn't figured it out yet.
So what's happening is people they're just submitting false affidavits. So they're giving fake leases. So when they submit the fake lease to the court,
They're committing another felony, they're showing a forgery to the
Exactly.
court.
exactly,
And they're actually got the nerve to do that, and that's working somewhere?
apparently.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, there was actually a website. I don't know if you saw the Channel 2
I've seen.
story, but
I'm the landlord, and I'm going out to serve an eviction. So now we're back in civil eviction court. The squatter's coming in with a forged lease in eviction court, is that where, or is the squatter convincing the sheriff who comes out to arrest him that he, the squatter, has a right to be there by showing the landlord?
You're calling the sheriff's department and telling them that you got somebody in your house trespassing. If the sheriff goes out there and they present them with an affidavit, then the sheriff has to leave it alone, and they have to submit the affidavit to the magistrate court. The magistrate court has 7 days to determine what's going on. And what's going on is that would be a fake lease that they submitted, and they would be removed from the
You're
property.
starting with a criminal warrant proceeding. You're showing a document of notice. The squatter has to know in somehow when you're coming to court. So it goes from criminal to civil in the context of this particular statute.
that's correct.
Am I right?
Yes,
That's
that's correct.
If they have a document, a
If they have
proper
a
document, it would then go civil.
And if the document is forged, then we got a new felony.
Right.
Oh. And this is a misdemeanor, but a forgery is a felony, so that's risky, and this is working?
I would assume that.
Yeah, it's
the
working.
Magistrate would bind it over to Superior Court, at which time it becomes a felony. Would that be right?
I have no idea.
There's
I don't
gotta be
think- I
somebody
don't
there
think
to
the-
make the arrest, though.
Do what now?
I guess you would have an officer in the court to make the arrest.
Probably so, and carried to jail to post bond.
Right.
But if I'm just a landlord, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm out of order here. If I'm a landlord and I go to just get a regular criminal trespass warrant and say that I've already notified the squatter to be gone, why doesn't the magistrate give me a criminal trespass warrant?
I lost you on that question. Because you do have the option of a criminal trespass that may be quicker, depending on what the situation is.
That's what I'm causing trouble here.
Representative Seaball, I'm going to call up some help for you here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Sam Mullins, and of course, I gratefully appreciate
If
the.
you could pull that mic so that we can get folks listening in online.
Chairman, thank you, and I greatly appreciate all the work that the sponsors have been involved in. Let's go back a little bit so that we're covering the fact pattern here. The fact pattern here is at least over 1,200 premises have folks illegally there. And when the owner sometimes figures out, i.e. the person who's in the military and has no clue that her house is being destroyed, often when they go there, they're facing a gun. And that's been covered in several Channel 2 stories, at least one Channel 5 story. That's a felony. But the act of squatting should be a criminal offense also, other than a minimus trespass issue. The other issue, which leads to a lot of the timing that Representative Seabaugh is talking, just being really blunt. In most of Metro Atlanta, when you file the paperwork for the ejectment, using the term that's used for intruders, you can grow old waiting for that process. I mean, we have counties in Metro Atlanta where it will take over a year to show up to those premises.
For an eviction process.
No, for an ejectment process, for an intruder.
Eviction process too, but I mean.
Yeah, but that's part of Representative Silcox's bill that you'll be hearing later, 1203. But we're talking about intruders and ejectments in this bill. And what you've got here is law enforcement in some of the metro counties deciding that their priorities are nowhere near these squatter issues, so it's not occurring at all. And at such time as it occurs, let's say there's the fake lease that Representative Seabaugh talked about, that's another 6 months that these people have free rent and can destroy the place. And then if you go to have a hearing, that's another 6 months or a year. I mean, my God, this is great. You get to have 3 years without paying a dime in a house you don't have any legal status. The provision you were talking about, Representative, I think is actually, regarding the civil versus criminal, is actually a very good faith effort by the sponsors to say, look, if someone literally in good faith doesn't know that they're not illegal, that they're illegally there, let's give them the opportunity to demonstrate that so that they frankly don't face a misdemeanor of a high nature. That was really intended to show good faith for someone who didn't intentionally create the criminal offense. So in many metro counties, this is literally a free pass. You file the paperwork, the matter's dead, which is totally unfair to the property owner because, let's face it, for most people, that's their most valuable asset. And you're telling them you don't really care about that asset. And I mean, there's numerous stories covering the problem. It's everywhere in Metro Atlanta. If I could say one or two other things. So when we were waiting for the session to end, and I'm doing this at the request of Representative Reeves, the police chief of the city of South Fulton and 2 council members from the city of South Fulton were here. They had a work session that started at 4 o'clock. So they went to the rope line. I guess Representative Reeves was the one that they reached. And then when Representative Reeves came here, guess who got a document that was prepared, a different document. So there's a couple by the different representatives. I don't represent the city of South Fulton. My act was literally being in the room. And it was Councilwoman Helen Wills, District 3. And she, they've had several very high-profile squatting incidents in their city that generally deal with guns. So it almost is akin to the danger sworn officers face when they go to issue an arrest warrant, where you knock on the door of these premises and you have no idea if a gunshot's coming right towards you in these squatting situations. So what she did is she didn't draft, she wrote a whole 2-page letter. I think Representative Silcox has a different letter from a different councilman talking about the decreased property values, the safety concerns, the property damage, the legal issues, the neighborhood disruption, the negative perception, the health and sanitation issue, increased burden. So the police chief was literally saying, he can't do his job.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Are you on 14?
This is a criminal operation and an organized crime, and
Yes.
squatting is taking advantage of, and all I'm here to do, I'm with you, I'm just trying to understand how this works. Because the eviction process in DeKalb and Fulton County right now is, in the view of many, already a broken system. I mean, it's already taking a year in Fulton County. And getting, in our normal eviction process, getting somebody who is a criminal already, and they've officially trying to evict them, that's the same fact pattern you just told me.
Yes.
And when somebody are pulling guns on each other, it doesn't have anything to do with squatting. That's a different felony, you know.
It's
So
true,
tell me how
but it's a
this process-
common fact pattern.
Tell me how this process works that's different than the current ejection process, or different from the.
Well, what this has, and Representative Seabaugh started talking about it, what this has time limits. So this, number one, it moves it from superior to magistrate, and we've talked to magistrate judges about it.
What from Superior?
Because in Superior Court, they were given a jury. So once the sheriff showed up in a year, and then once you had it going back to the court, then folks would say, I'm rightfully there. You then waited for a jury trial.
You're talking now about,
Squatting.
you're talking about an initiation of a process that starts in Superior Court?
No, we're talking about the, what happens once the sworn officer has gone to the premises and told folks, if you think you're right, give me the documents within X number of days, you can give me a counter affidavit, et cetera, and then it goes to the court at that point. But the way law is now, it goes to Superior Court for a jury trial, which, I mean, let's face it, in Fulton County, how many years is that? I mean,
Multiple.
seriously. Now, in one of those 2 counties that you just mentioned, and I don't disagree with your analysis, one of those counties have told me that their sworn officer does 2 cases a week. The other county told me they try and do 10. 1,200 cases in Metro Atlanta. The majority are in Fulton and DeKalb. 2 a week in one county, 10 a week in the other.
So are you talking, when you say 2 cases a week, 2 cases of what? Squatting?
Of
Is that-
squatting.
Okay.
Of squatting. So what we're dealing, I mean, this is legalized free rent.
The landlord goes to get a criminal warrant for criminal trespass, and you're saying that
The sheriff may or may not show up in the next 6 months, or the marshal, and then when they show up, they gotta find someone, and then when you find someone, then they can do a counter affidavit, or they can go through the process that's in Representative Seabaugh's bill, and instead of waiting a year for a jury trial, it then goes to the magistrate judge, who within 7 days schedules a hearing. Similarly, similar to evictions, not to confuse them, but similar to evictions, once you get an order from the court, it could take 6 months or a year till they show back up at the premises. This bill says, no, within 7 days, you're back there. And it gives in this bill the ability for sheriffs, marshals, or other like officers to be able to carry out these activities. You have some cities, for instance, that are saying, we'll pay for our municipal officers to sit there and assist with this backlog. I mean, it's totally out of control. I mean, it is the Wild West. There's no other way to describe it. And, so Representative Seabaugh from Cobb, this councilwoman and the one that gave a note to Representative Silcox is from South Fulton, that the problem's all over. And no one is dealing with it under the current law.
I'm only interested in what the process is here, and that's where
Well, I mean,
I'm failing
you
to
file the paperwork.
file the paperwork. That means, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop if you want me to.
You file the affidavit that says that the
Does that mean you're asking for a criminal warrant for trespass under current law, or does that mean you're asking for a squatting warrant under this statute?
under the current law, you're asking for a swatting. The problem is you could wait 6 months or a year for that activity to ever occur after the filing. It doesn't happen. It is not a priority. So the intent of this law is to create time limits where it will happen.
All right, Representative Kelly.
I'm going to try and do this too. So right now, current Georgia law, I think someone's hunting on my property in Cedartown. I call the sheriff or the DNR agent. I say, hey, get this guy off my property. They come out, investigate it. They find out he's somewhere he's not supposed to be. They arrest him or, minimum issue him a fine, citation, whatever. We're creating a new criminal act here, right? But it's still initiated the same way. You call the cops or you call law enforcement. They show up to investigate it, correct? When they get there, they say, hey, look, this is a complaint been made about you. We're going to issue this citation. So they'll hand on the paper citation. They'll say, hey, look, you say you're here to, rightfully, just give us a lease. You got 72 hours to do it, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm guessing the sheriff comes back.
At a later date to be determined,
Okay, not necessarily within 72 hours.
maybe a year.
Okay, that's what we're doing in this. We're not putting any guardrails on the sheriff there. We're saying that some sheriffs or some law enforcement officers, they do their investigations different. Some sheriffs and law enforcement officers may really be on this, and they may start a 72-hour clock the minute they hand that citation. And then they may say, if they're doing their job the way I think, once that 72 hours is over, they'll send somebody back out there and say, hey, you never came to see us. You never gave us what we asked you for. So now we're here to arrest you. That's the way that works,
Yes, sir.
correct? So that handles that piece. And then simultaneously, that will also initiate the procedure through 44-1132, of which we're changing, in magistrate court for a writ of possession to be issued after a dispossessory proceeding has been held. What is and that can be scheduled within 30 days?
30 or so.
I know
I think
that,
it's 7.
In the new.
but when will the magistrate judge issue the writ?
Right, that the idea is that the magistrate judge is better able to work fast.
So there's no time limit on the magistrate, just their normal course
I think it's
proceedings.
7 days.
I think it's 7 days.
Let's see that.
I can find that.
But that's after a dispossessory proceeding, correct?
Well,
So
it's
when would the dispossessory proceeding take place?
Well, it's supposed to have I believe it's supposed to be 7 days for that initial hearing,
Okay.
separate and apart.
So after the arrest is done, it can happen as soon as 72 hours. But there's I'm talking as quick as it could happen.
Right.
I make a complaint, investigation, 72 hours expires, arrest, 7 days after that. So now you're 10 days in, quickest scenario. You have the proceeding. And then within 7 days,
Within 7 days of the court order.
of the court order and the time of the appeal, because that's built in.
Right.
What is that? Is the appeal 30 days?
Generally 30.
That's what I thought. So now you're 10 days in, possibly, then 30 days in for the appeal to expire, and then within 7 days, they have to serve the writ of possession and remove from the premises.
Yes, sir, which literally saves years.
Right. And that's what I'm kind of, was that a little better?
It's a little better. I'm trying to figure out when a warrant issues. Totally out of control. I mean, he goes out there and says, get off this property, and then the guy does not give, so he cannot arrest him on that day
Correct.
because he's gonna say he's a tenant. And then 3 days later, he shows the piece of paper. Then
Or lack
it goes to
thereof.
the magistrate court for a warrant at that point, or a hearing on whether or not the paper is a good
hearing.
piece
A
of
hearing.
paper.
A hearing.
But if they haven't, just like if someone's hunting on my land when they're not supposed to be, they don't have to get an arrest warrant issued. They can arrest him right then.
Because he's seen the crime.
He's seen the crime, and he's seen the crime here. But in this case, versus we still are giving them. Somebody's hunting on my property, they can show a DNR officer, hey, Trey Kelly gave me permission to hunt here, usually a note or a text message or anything like that. Here we're giving these squatters additional protections from that in terms of 72 hours to get their lease together.
And let's face it, in Metro Atlanta, we're really not dealing with someone's hunting on your property. We're dealing with someone who's taken your property and maybe destroying your property, and let's give them 2 years to do it even better.
You keep talking about the dysfunction of our lower courts, and that's what I mean.
No, I'm talking, no, I'm talking, well, look, there's plenty of dysfunction time-wise in the courts. There's also plenty of dysfunction in going to the premise from the sworn officer. And of course, what we hear a lot of times is we don't have enough staff at the jail. So clearly, we're not going to use our limited staff to go deal with an intruder situation when we need them at the jail. So that's what you hear in some counties. In some counties, frankly, they handle it per the code and it's not a problem. But you can count them on one hand in Metro Atlanta that have that situation. In Cobb, where Representative Seabaugh and I live with, that the sheriff has it under control.
And this isn't doing anything that's going to force the sheriff to show up. If I call that sheriff on a Monday, that sheriff still don't have to show up there till Wednesday or Friday or Sunday or 2 Mondays from then or a month.
Yes, sir.
We're still not touching them there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, I mean, I can't, and Representative Seabaugh talked about this. There's literally no controls currently handling this situation. If the sheriff or the marshal, because in some counties it's the marshal, if the sheriff or the marshal says, I don't have adequate staff, it stays on a desk, literally. And it could stay on a desk for a year. And that's not even counting what happens if then someone decides they want to request a jury trial.
That's all happening today in evictions.
Absolutely. So this bill actually gives more due process than they have now. When you look at when Representative Trey is talking about the 3 days to show that you got to, I mean, it's more process than is in the system currently under this bill. So the intent here has really been to be protective of innocent individuals that don't know that they're illegally on the premises. I was going to say one or two other things, but I don't want to do that if we're still talking about the process. But I do greatly appreciate Representative Trey, you going through the fact pattern better than clearly I was doing. If we get to the wording of the bill, I wanted to make 2 comments. One is on line 38. My good friend Richard Smith, who always makes me look bad when it comes to attire, from PAC, suggested that the word occupy be removed from the bill because that word, in fact, argues against what we're trying to do in the bill. So should there be a motion to move forward, he'd want the word occupy in line 38 redacted. Similarly, if you look on page 4, line 77 says the sheriff shall, but on line 84, it says the sheriff, marshal, or like officer of the court. And Representative Seabaugh and the sponsors that I've talked to all support revising line 37 so that similarly would say the sheriff, marshal. or-
77.
77, I'm sorry. So that this, right, it's the same language on 84 would be inserted on line 77. So those are the two proposed changes, sheriff, marshal, like officer, and removing the word occupy, because I never, ever disagree with Richard Smith, because I know he is far smarter than me, and it would be a really bad thing for me to do. And I do greatly appreciate all your time, and I really do appreciate Representative Seabaugh's time, Representative Reeves, Representative Silkos, all the sponsors. This is not an easy issue. I get that. But at the moment, nothing is happening in most jurisdictions. And I'm sorry if I overspoke, Chairman. I'm going back to Hyde.
Representative Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, my friend Sam Mullins, for being here. I think I missed the beginning of the conversation, but I think we've hashed out a lot of the things. And I do practice eviction dispossessory law a little bit. I'm by no means an expert, but my question is on Section 3. From line 75 to 83, I'm going to focus on that part. So if the person who is alleged to have been trespassing provides an affidavit, then the sheriff will go ahead and submit both affidavits, not arrest, and the magistrate court, and it will go before the magistrate court for a trial. That's what it says. And then on line 80, it says, upon the court issuing a writ of possession after dispossessory proceedings. So what's confusing there is, are we having, as soon as the sheriff turns in both affidavits, is magistrate court setting that case for a hearing? Or does the landlord separately have to file now a dispossessory proceeding and go through that process now that there is a counter affidavit?
There is no dispossessory equivalent in dealing with the squatter statute.
So this section 3, so 70A and B are two separate proceedings?
Yes. And incidentally, Representative, you showed me another error, so thank you. Line 76 similarly should say sheriff, marshal, or like officer.
And the only thing is that starting with line 80, it says, upon the court issuing a writ of possession after dispossessory proceedings as a result of a violation of the offense of criminal trespass. So that's why I'm confused as to, is it because of the violation of a criminal trespass that there was a hearing, and as a result, it's found that the person was trespassing, and therefore now there's going to be a writ of possession after a dispossessory proceeding? Does that make sense?
My guess,
Representative
Representative
Reeves.
All right,
it's
thank
this,
you, Bill.
it's this line, so it's the word dispossessory on line 80.
My apologies, I was in the CLOB in another committee. If you'll turn to Section 4, which is 441133, that's the intruder statute, and most judges and law enforcement, when they hear squatters, they say, go use the intruder statute. What we tried to do in this draft is get the timeline for the intruder statute to conform to a dispossessory statute. A dispossessory is one where you have a lease, where you have a tenancy. The Section 4 intruder statute in 441133, that's what would be filed, and we were trying to conform the two, which has, been a difficult task. So anything that says dispossessory, we could say an action pursuant to, 4411 32 and following. So it's not a dispossessory, it's an intruder action, an action
Right.
against an intruder.
So I think that whole section B part, because you're basically, in order to have a dispossessory, you have to establish that there is a landlord and tenant relationship. And
Right.
here we're saying in section B, we're talking about a writ of possession after a dispossessory proceeding as a result of a violation of a
Not a
criminal trespass. So
dispossessory.
essentially, those are
Yeah,
two.
not a dispossessory proceeding, an intruder proceeding pursuant to the statute. But a writ of possession, it's my understanding, that is what the courts are comfortable giving at the end of an intruder action.
Correct.
So just conforming that language. Additionally, lines 47 through 49, what we were trying to accomplish there is bring the timeline for an intruder or squatter action into the expedited eviction dispossessory timeline of 7 days to answer, a 14-day grace period, 7 days after that, and then the writ of possession can be carried out unless the judge says carry it out in stanter. So that was the reference there that I think someone had a question about before the meeting.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Bruce.
Don't leave yet, because my question's to him. But I apologize. I'm the only one here that's not an attorney, so if I'm saying something that you guys already know, I apologize. But I'm confused. If I'm the homeowner and I'm in my house, in the bedroom or whatever, and somebody comes in, I can feel like my life is being threatened. I can blow his head off, right? I can shoot him. So if I go away for a weekend or whatever and I come back and somebody's in my house, I'm still feeling like I'm being, like I'm in danger, and I shoot him then. Do I go to jail?
I would not suggest that.
No, but I'm asking the question. Would I go to jail for protecting my
Yes.
property?
Yes.
Why?
Because there is no, it doesn't satisfy the threat scenario that's commonly in all the statutes. If when you're outside the house and they're in the house, your life is not in. When you're outside the house and they're inside the house, they're not threatening your life.
Okay, but if they're in the house, and I come in the house, my house is sizable. They could be on one side of the house. I don't even know they're in there. But if I come in and I discover that somebody is in my house, would I not be able to protect my right and my property? Because I keep hearing everybody talk about the right of the squatter. I'm trying to figure out the right of the homeowner.
It changes how you find out that person's in there. It's going to change how you find out they're in there. Now, if you pull up in your driveway and you see somebody come to the front door, then you don't have a right to walk up to that front door and shoot them.
Okay.
Now, if you live in a big old house like you got, my house, it ain't gonna be no problem. But if you're coming back to your house from a couple weeks long vacation, and you're in your kitchen and somebody comes running down the hall from the bedroom, I think factually you'd probably have a right to shoot them.
Okay.
That's not legal advice.
It's not that I want to shoot anybody. I'm just trying to. We keep talking about the right of the person that's broken into my house, and I'm trying to figure out the right of the person that owns the house. Whoever broke in there knows that that's not their house. They know it's not theirs. So this whole notion of somebody not understanding that they're doing something illegal, that's confusing to me because they know it's not their house.
But sir, under the current law, it will take years to resolve that issue.
Okay, it sounds like we need to fix that law.
I think in some instances, the individual who's rented the house thinks that they do have a valid lease. I think that is a scenario, and I think that's why we're giving them 72 hours and an opportunity to present a lease that then would have a trial on whether that's a valid lease. And if that's happening, I think there's some people, some of these squatters, I think, are being hoodwinked by other people. I think that's the scenario why we're giving more due process than the individual who may just be, trespassing on someone's land to hunt, because I think some of these people, there's an Instagram account where you can go on and someone's holding themselves out to be, property managers who are letting you lease a house for a one-time payment, and they give you a valid lease. And that's the scenario that we're dealing with here. We're dealing with two people who are being taken advantage of here. One, the person who signed the lease and given the money, and two, the person whose property's been rented out by some unscrupulous person.
Okay, I don't want to belabor it, but it sounds to me like I'm, as a homeowner, being denied my right to protect myself and my property, and I'm a little confused by that.
And
but
you're expressing exactly why the sponsors brought the bill forward.
okay.
And I believe that whenever, I think Representative Reeves had proposed a couple changes pursuant to the query from Representative Hong.
Okay, Representative Reeves.
Thank you, Chairman. On line 47, if we strike the words demand for possession and removal, insert the words the timelines, I think that captures what we were trying to do there. We had some judges who said use the dispossessory timeline. So strike demand for possession and removal, insert the timelines on line 47. And then on line 80, strike dispossessory and put intruder on there.
Say that second one again.
On line 80, strike dispossessory and insert intruder.
I'm sorry. Couldn't we just say, after proceedings pursuant to 44-1133?
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
And take out dispossession.
Right, and striking dispossessory, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I think that's stuff that comes after, but I may want to look at it as we.
Yeah.
He's done. Okay. What number you got?
I think that one's broke.
Can you grab that other over there?
This one's 16.
16. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Representative Seabold. This is a bill that's needed, and I'm glad we're here addressing this. One issue that I've thought about is how to streamline this a little, and kind of like the Sheriff's Department going out and issuing a citation after the complaint's been filed in the magistrate court. The sheriff goes out and issues the citation, gives the squatter 7 days to appear in court to answer that charge. Once that squatter comes to court and produces his documents, say his or her documents stating that they have a lease or whatever, that the judge will then determine whether that's a good lease or it's a invalid lease. If it's an invalid lease, fraud, then the judge can bound that case over to Superior Court for criminal trespassing, which is a felony. But to streamline this, wouldn't we be easier to send the sheriff out once the complaint's made to show up in magistrate court within 7 days of the issue of that citation? If he shows, then the burden of proof is on the squatter to show that they have a valid lease or not. 90% of the time, I'm going to say they're probably not even going to show up because of the fact that they don't have any documentation. Then the magistrate judge could issue a bench warrant for that person. So am I missing something? Wouldn't that streamline the whole process somewhat?
Well, I think it would. I drive an ambulance for a living, so I defer to an attorney if there's one in the room.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose of this bill, is to streamline that person that is criminally trespassing in somebody's personal property.
Okay.
So, whatever the best way is to get there, I like what you're saying. I wouldn't give them 7 days to show up. I'd give them the 3 days to show up with their
Okay,
affidavit.
I mean, 7 or 3, it doesn't matter with me, but I was just trying to figure out.
But from what you say, it sounds like that would definitely streamline the process.
Chairman Reeves, what do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea, and that's why it's good to have a former judge on Judiciary. What we try to do in this bill is, number one, criminalize squatters, and number two, work with existing law about intruders. That was the closest that law enforcement and judges and others said we've got in the code. We've tightened that up, but I like your idea, and we're glad to flesh that out further.
I don't
with you.
think the squatter has any rights. I think the
Well-
squatter's in violation. The squatter needs to be gone.
Here's the unfortunate thing. There's enough of a sentiment under current Georgia law where the default is to say that's a civil matter, go take it up with civil authorities. So we've got to make it clear how you address a squatter under Georgia law. Did y'all hear from the South Fulton?
No, I didn't.
We gave them.
Okay, you've got that. I wanted to point. I'm in Northeast Metro Atlanta. We had 2 city council members and the police chief from the city of South Fulton who came, and I know Representative Bruce represents that area. They got the statistics from Fulton County on these. There are like hundreds of these intruder actions that have been filed and are still pending because that needs tightening up. And to get from current law of 1,200 squatters who are claiming, under various current Georgia law, we need to say it's a crime and here's how you deal with them. And I'm glad to explore that citation and binding over to Superior Court idea you have. We're just trying to get from current law to a better place. And this is something that got here from the West Coast, apparently. Washington State and California, some folks perfected this scam of gaining entry through all sorts of deceit and trickery and squatting for months or years on end. And so nipping it in the bud here in Georgia and moving from the current law to one that is proactive in dealing with squatters is what we're trying to do in this bill.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, Judge, maybe I shouldn't be
You wanna
trying
get
become
in-
an attorney.
You want to get into your mind?
Because I agree with you.
Okay. All right. Representative, who's it over there? 13?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to apologize to the bill author. Just caught this. There's a current bill moving through Judiciary non-civil dealing with this same statute, and I can tell you that there's going to be a conflict in code sections potentially here and reading differently, and so we're on a collision course of 2 freight trains here. House Bill 1099 is the purple paint bill. I might suggest that the author think about stopping one of those locomotives and getting it off the track before it hits that other one by striking Section 2 and speaking with Representative David Huddleston as to whether he'd be amicable to adding that in his legislation.
All right. I'm not. Go ahead.
There is actually another bill that is moving through our subcommittee that's dealing with the same subsection. I have spoken with Representative Vance about this, so I'm not, I'm not sure as far as whether he's going to proceed, but.
And that's
There are some.
922 is that bill.
Okay.
But that bill, if I may say, doesn't relate to intruders. It relates to criminal trespass.
Yeah.
And
I would just ask the committee, if there's more work on criminal trespass, this issue on 44, 11, 32, and 33, sections 3 and 4, please keep that moving, because that is, South Fulton identified the fact we got like hundreds of them in Fulton County, and there are many of them in other areas, and that's something that needs streamlining ASAP.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, I'm going to call, who we got? Chief Keith Meadows.
I can speak on his behalf. He had to go to a city council meeting.
All right.
Mr. Andrew Long is here.
And Mr. Long, all right. Thank you. If y'all will step out. All right, gentlemen, it'll help if y'all get right into those microphones.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Andrew Long, AR Long Company. I am the consultant for the city of South Fulton. I proudly represent those residents, and I'm glad to be able to be here before you today. Representative Roger Bruce, who obviously sits on this committee, asked for the letter of support from the city on the city letterhead be placed in your folders, so you all have those. And the chief of police, Keith Meadows, had to leave, plus the other two council members that came to speak and testify in support of HB 1017. But I'm going to have someone to speak on behalf of the chief that is in the city of South Fulton briefly. But thank you for allowing us to be here.
All right, thank you. And Rogers?
Lieutenant Juba Rogers, Chief of Staff to Chief Meadows and Office of the Chief.
Thank you.
So we do support this legislation. One of the key issues that we've dealt with, I personally, I was deputized by Sheriff Patrick Labatt. So we took the initiative initially to try to counteract the squatter problem we were facing. So we were inundated with calls for service. There are squatters on our property. So we met with Sheriff Labatt. Hey, can we get deputized in order to try to combat this problem and help the sheriff's office get this under control under 441130. So we got deputized. I participated with the sheriff's office in about 5 intruder ejections. So in all of those, there was a criminal element behind it. So most of those people we encountered stolen property. We encountered people with warrants, aggravated assault. The last one we did also in not far from Representative Roger Bruce, where he lives, we recovered 9 pounds of marijuana, stolen guns. Not at his house. Guns, armor, Kevlar helmets, just similar items that we find in ongoing criminal enterprises that, the correlation that squatters are taking part of. So, we just want to continue working forward with you guys and getting some legislation passed. It hasn't worked that well with the sheriff's office. Sheriffs, they're elected officials. So if Sheriff Labatt doesn't get elected again, we won't have that ability to be deputized officers to continue to push forth this effort. So having the ability to do so as municipal peace officers, that'll be very important to us.
We simply wanted to come by and stress the negative impact that squatters are having on the city of South Fulton. And we thank Representative Seaball for bringing this legislation forward, and we're glad that it got heard today and just wanted to make our presence felt.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The timelines that you experienced in the cases that you were involved in, how quickly could you get somebody out?
So initially, we were kind of at the helm of the sheriff's office policies. So the sheriff's office, they're backlogged. So they're backlogged right now until April or May from the ejection proceeding standpoint. So last I heard, they're almost up to about 200 affidavits across Fulton County. So it's significantly been pushed out for the timeline.
All right. I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Oh. I'd like to call on Robert Smith from PAC.
RABERT, SMITH. I'm Robert Smith with the Prosecuting Attorneys Council.
All right.
The question I have, and just want to walk this through because I know that there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of questions about what the bill does, how it operates. It's not that this is needed. There is a problem. It's, the WSB investigation. There are other instances, and it's not limited just here in metro areas. It's a nationwide problem. It's a statewide problem. Doing something about it is good policy. The question is how we're going to go about doing this. Representative Kelly had a very good point. Someone's hunting on his land. He calls DNR, calls the sheriff. Sheriff comes out, finds the person. Hey, you're not on here with permission. Here's your warning, leave. If the person doesn't leave after a reasonable time, law enforcement's allowed to come in and take them out. What this bill does is essentially, and is Representative, and I apologize, Representative Bruce, I blanked. Representative Bruce pointed out, this does give rights to squatters that don't currently exist. One of the questions, and I want to thank Representative Reeves and Representative Seaball and Attorney General Owens for the discussion about removing that word occupy. But one of the questions I've got for you right now, under current law, if someone were to say, decide to pitch a tent, or not even pitch a tent, decide that they want to live in this room. Basically, I'm going to stay here tonight. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm just going to stay here. You can right now have laws to eject me. You pass this law, how are things changed? And I submit to you that basically, that right now, because of, and this is my understanding of it, it seems like that if I were to say that I'm now here for a period of time and I'm trying to live here in this room, you'd have to go through the process of going and getting the 7 day, the 3 day, and all the additional days. We're making this difficult for law enforcement. We're making this difficult for lawyers because you're in Title 16. You're in my world. How do you want a jury to be instructed for this? How do you, for 6 people or 12 people to be told that someone's violated the law, how do you want this to read in plain English that they understand it? And that's part of why I asked to have the word occupy removed, because that made sense to me. But this discussion about Title 44, and when you have the certain number of days, I'm going to hearken you to another statute that's a very fun one to work with, and that's the bail statute. Basically, the surety statute, if you don't have your sureties done within a certain period of time, your dates are cut off automatically. If you're saying that the 7 day notice is important, then that means my partners, the law enforcement officers, have to know it is 7 days, not 6, not 10. And if you don't do it within 7 days, does that now mean we can't go forward with our criminal prosecution under this statute, and we need to use a different one? This is a problem. There are people whose houses are being decimated by tenants or fake tenants. So this is something to have a discussion about. My only request is that if you're going to put in a procedure and put in new law, put it in such that I can understand it, my law enforcement partners can understand it, and my jurors can understand it. So that way we can effectuate your policy.
Questions? Representative Silcox.
So, Robert, thank you for coming. You're always the voice of wisdom. I was just curious if you were receptive to Representative Scoggins' suggestion, because then you go to the bench warrant, and then there's a reasonable tie back to Title 16.
There's a certain amount of streamlining, and but one of the things also you've got to remember is when we start streamlining, and my good friend Macy Lynn's not here right now to point out that when we start streamlining, we are bumping up against the Constitution and due process. So I think that's the other thing that the sponsor's trying to do here is make sure that we are
That's right.
we are putting some due process safeguards in here for people who are innocent. Somebody who thinks I rented this house for $1,000 to the guy on the corner. He gave me a piece of paper saying it's a lease. I think I'm here legit. And your heart goes out for those folks because they rented Representative Bruce's house, and he's not going to rent his house out to somebody for that cheap. It's such an immaculate estate. They should, but the problem is that then they should have known better. I mean, the idea is if you walk in, but some people are not sophisticated, and so, but that then gets into law enforcement discretion, prosecutorial discretion. There are other ways to be able to go after the bad actors, and the bad actor is the person who does trick somebody into the lease. The bad actor is also someone that when law enforcement shows up and says, get out, they decide instead to have a rager and destroy the property. but we have laws for that already.
Well, wouldn't the judge be able to weigh that out?
Yes.
Okay, and then if the other side, the squatter has the paperwork and the judge rules against the squatter has a right to appeal just like you would in any case.
They do, and if I remember correctly, one of the complaints that's been made right now is that we're talking about two particular counties where we're always hearing that they don't have enough judges, and the judges are constantly at work and at all classes, not just Superior Court for the appeals from Magistrate Court, but also the magistrate judges. So that's, it's there are so many issues, and there's so many needs, but I agree with you that that's something that a magistrate judge, in some counties can be brought in to solve and help resolve it.
Okay, we just lit up here. All right. Who's 13? Chairman, go ahead. Chairman Smith.
Hello again, Robert. It's great to have you with us. There's an interesting part of your comments. You said we already have laws to deal with some of this conduct. It's interesting to me that are we finding that judges are not sitting on the bench enough, or do we not have enough judges as it is? I mean, what's the case? Because I see a lot of judges showing up here. I know we had one with us today, but his calendar is very well handled.
I'm not knowledgeable enough to be able to answer that question.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
All right, Representative Reeves.
Mr. Smith, sections 3 and 4 of the bill, that intruder statute under Title 44. Title 44 is about dispossession from real estate. That's not criminal, right? Sections 3 and 4.
The gentleman knows of what he speaks.
All right, thank you. And my point on that is, we'll hear from legislative counsel, I guess, on the criminal part, but sections 3 and 4 we can fix. Those are civil real estate matters, and under the current state of the law, arguably a squatter has more rights than a tenant who's got a lease and is paying rent under this section 3 and 4 statutes, the intruder statutes, and this bill would clean that up.
Representative Hong.
And this, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this may answer Representative Bruce's question. The whole reason behind this is that homeowners, when they do call, when they see trespassers, and they called an officer, they come out and somebody says, no, I'm supposed to be here. I have a lease. I don't have it with me, but I have a lease. The officer is not going to kick them out. They're going to say, this is a civil matter, go to eviction court. That's what's been happening. So that's why we're here, as far as trying to see if we can make sure that we have some kind of a criminal trespass in a procedure to do that. And you made a good point. We're trying to kind of mix that civil and criminal together, and where should this lie? Are you having an issue as far as blending those two and how we can do it? There are too many dates, now we're kind of prolonging everything, doing the civil part and the criminal part all together. Is that kind of your opinion?
That's part of the problem. And don't forget, in the criminal statutes, everything is strictly construed against the state. We have to prove things beyond a reasonable doubt. So that is our burden. That's what we're supposed to do for due process reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But just so every time you pick something, every time we do a word or we pick a timing, it's going to be on us, and we have to comply with it. And if we don't get it done right, if our law enforcement partners aren't able to get it done within the time span, then we could lose out. So yes, I understand the policy, but it's one of those things of we could possibly lose out because of a date not running right, or not giving out the appropriate amount of notice at the right, as it's changed. So yes, I guess that is one of my concerns, is we are blending two concepts, the Title 44 landlord issues with Title 16. And I think also I need to say, Representative Bruce, violence is never an answer. But
For anybody listening, you can't just shoot somebody if they're in your house, that you have to feel threatened. All right, Representative Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think you may have just answered the question. One of the questions that I was just trying to figure out, if I'm looking at line 48, trying to understand the distinction between a holdover tenant, which is defined under 44-750, and a squatter. But I think you answered my question, so thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Representative Silcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would you prefer that we just create a new crime under Title 16 and rename these things and do it wholly in the criminal code?
That's for y'all to decide. All I'm asking for is just make sure when I pick it up, or when a law enforcement officer or somebody who hasn't gone to law school picks it up, they can read it and understand what they're supposed to do and not supposed to do. Because that's the other that is the other thing to think about. You know, we are talking about, you know, if you're going to criminalize activity, don't you want the citizens to know what they're not supposed to be doing? And that's my question, is that, you know, there was a very robust discussion that took place by two members of, you know, both parties a few minutes ago about this bill, and I think both of them kind of left with questions. I left with questions from that discussion, and, you know, just clarity, please.
Okay, thank you.
All right. 14, who's got it? Representative Oliver.
I'm going back to what Chairman Smith said about 30 minutes ago, that he had bills moving forward that are in conflict with this. And we definitely have trying to create a new action here that combines criminal and civil. I've kind of got that. That's where the discussion began an hour ago. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to suggest that you appoint some little group of people, not including me, but including Mr. Smith, to try to coordinate these discussions in a way that might be more practical.
All right. Representative Kelly.
Mr. Chairman, I was kind of going to ask a procedural question, just where we are in witnesses, and because I feel like we're starting to enter into a conversation about possible amendments and things.
I think everybody in here is signed up to talk about this bill.
Okay.
And so,
and
my
because I think
thinking
at the
is-
proper time, if we get an amendment about Section 2, I may want to ask Legislative Council to weigh in as to whether there's a conflict in her opinion. But until we get to that point, I didn't want to start debating amendments before we had
I
amendments.
think we're at a stage where we probably just need to declare this hearing only and move on to our other bills.
Well, while we're doing that, could I ask her the question then now so we can know what her answer will be as we're moving forward?
Okay.
So if our great legislative council, can you help us understand when you have this conflict? Is it when they're touching the same subject matter? Explain it to me. Because I want to make sure we get this right, because they're two important measures. The purple paint measure that we talked about, and now the new squatter criminal procedure. What in your mind, if both of those bills pass the House and pass the Senate, what happens next?
Ms. Carter, if you'd like.
Yes, Holly Carter, Legislative Counsel. Already in the criminal trespass statute, there are several paragraphs that denote different types of criminal trespass. That's already existing in the statute. Without looking at the exact text of the purple paint legislation that Chairman Smith was speaking about, that is a other type of criminal trespass dealing with signage, forestry, that type of thing. This stanza, subsection on criminal trespass, is dealing with a different type of criminal trespass. And to me, in constructing the bill, we need to get together and correlate, what that is, but they both can exist because they're different. They're speaking to different types of criminal trespass, and that's already in the code. We already have different paragraphs denoting different kinds or different elements of a type of criminal trespass and what it means. So that the conflict wouldn't be there. It would just be in the bill. If we're going to include all these provisions, we need to make sure that they're cohesive and they're not in conflict. But the purple paint bill is addressing in my opinion, another type of criminal trespass that doesn't necessarily conflict with what the sponsor is trying to do here. That is my opinion at this time.
So I think what I got is it wouldn't be a per se conflict that would create a problem for the governor, but it's the famous lawyer answer sometimes that it could depend.
Correct.
All right.
All right, Representative, or Chairman Smith.
I'll wait.
You wait? All right. All right. Does anybody that signed up for this bill still want to come and talk, or, because I'm going to declare this, we're not going to take a vote on this today, and give you all a chance to work this out? Yes, sir. Are you Lieutenant Buck?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Last
Come on
time I
up.
was here, I spoke for 45 minutes. I will not do that again.
Thank you.
The reason why I feel, again, I'm Lieutenant Klaus Buck with the Fulton County Marshals. We are the busiest eviction department in the state of Georgia. We're the ones you talk about. We're the ones with the backlogs, and I actually got off the phone with my eviction division commander, and this is the reality on the ground. So let's look dead in. I asked him. I said, asked him, in a residential if a residential dispossessory is filed today, roughly how long will it take to get to an eviction? He said 6 to 8 months if an answer is filed. What about a default? At least 4 to 6. At least 4 to 6 months. This is long. This is unacceptable. I am a homeowner. I am a property owner. I believe in the rights of citizens to enjoy their property. I was laughing, thinking to myself, what we ought to do is we ought to have the squatters turn big rocks into little rocks for a month or two, and that might be the right consequence for them. So we take this extremely seriously. It's been said, and I'm sure it's been said in love, and I'm sure it's not meant to be hurtful, that we do not prioritize these cases. We most assuredly prioritize these cases. We don't just think about them. We work on them, and we think of little else. Every command staff meeting that we have in the Marshals Department, we're talking about how are evictions going. We're constantly diverting resources from other departmental functions to handle evictions. So I want to make it clear, I'm on board. My agency head, Marshal Maria McKee, is on board with resolving the situation. But I think we should work hard at being as constructive as possible. Judge, respectfully, I agree 100% with what you say. As far as creating a new criminal trespass statute to in effect have criminal trespass by squatting, that's a good proposition. The idea of using the citation to bring them into court is an excellent idea also, because the judge can make the determination. Is this squatting, or is this a bona fide, legitimate dispute, civil dispute? In which case the judge said, you can't bind it over, case dismissed, go to civil court. Otherwise, if it really is if it is squatting, then the judge and the courts can use their enormous compulsory powers of compulsion to get folks to do the right thing. My only concern, and I'm going to wrap this up, is this. We have got to be able to implement whatever law this learned committee gives a due pass to and passes the House of Representatives and the Senate. And I won't lie, I read the bill, particularly the substitute version, and I found myself confused. It seems to me that there are 3 separate forms of action in play here. 1, the criminal prosecution. I think we've got a tight handle on that. 2, the dispossessory proceeding, which is intended to remove tenants who are defaulting on their rent, who are otherwise violating the terms of their leases, and as well as tenants holding over, tenants who are staying too long. That's the traditional landlord-tenant dispossessory proceeding. But then we also have the ejectment proceeding against intruders. And that is an entirely different thing. That's a horse of a different color. And we need to, all I can say is that we should be cognizant about what form of action we're taking. And if we're going to combine them, we should combine them wholly. We should keep them separate. We should clearly show where the separation is.
Officer, what is the roadblocks that you're running into right now that extends the life of these cases?
Okay, well, there's some of this that is beyond my control. the judges judge as fast as they're going to judge. You know, there are due process questions here that just won't let it go. Just won't let it go faster. But when we get when a writ of possession, a court order directing an eviction is issued, we receive it. First thing we do is we reach out to the plaintiff or the plaintiff's agent and say, the landlord, that is, and we say, hey, we got your paper. We're here to schedule you. We've got to get. You've got to provide the labor because the property has to be set out. So the roadblocks come from a number of sources. One, a number of deputies. Deputies can only go so fast. And commencing an eviction is a little like opening a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. I've walked into eviction saying, this isn't going to take long, and it turns out it's a hoarder with 30 years of knickknacks and memorabilia and enough furniture for a small subdivision, much less a decent sized house. And then sometimes you go in and there's nothing. Sometimes you go in and the occupant has committed suicide, as happened to me. And it's happened more than once. Sometimes we do encounter vicious individuals, violent individuals. Sometimes we encounter deluded individuals. Sometimes we encounter the ill, the elderly. We encounter children. Sometimes it just hurts your heart. We never know what we're going to get, and the holdup is the unpredictability of the process. Another holdup is probably a question of labor, not number of deputies, but number of folks who will actually do the physical labor of putting the property out, because it's got to be set out. So I always tell people, the writ of possession gives the landlord possession of the real property, the premises. It does not give him possession of the defendant's personal property. That's another matter. So if he's going to be set out, his personal property must be set out. It's a question of numbers of deputies. It's a question of the number of hours in a day and the number of hours in a week and the amount of eviction labor that's involved. But I will say this, we take it extremely seriously. We take it painfully seriously. I won't lie, we sometimes think of little else.
Okay. All right. Representative Reeves.
Mr. Buck, in a situation where the property owner and the occupant never formed a landlord-tenant relationship, where you have a squatter situation, isn't it true that a lot of times the property owner is sent to the intruder statute to file an action under the intruder statute?
I can't, thank you, sir, first of all. I can't speak to what people are done by people other than me. But I have heard it. I've heard it said. I've heard it's done, and I think there's I'm not going to name names because I don't want to talk about people when they're not here to defend themselves. But I know there's a lot of confusion in law enforcement about the intruder statute. I personally have I've actually briefed the staff attorney for a Superior Court judge on how the intruder process works. And if I may, just take a minute and cut me off. Tell me to shut up, please. My wife always does. In an intruder proceeding, what happens is the aggrieved property owner draws up an affidavit saying, "Hey, I'm the owner of this property. There's folks on it who ain't got no right to be here. They have no. I have a good faith claim. They don't." Under the current statute, the affidavit is presented to the sheriff. The sheriff then goes out. I think the phrase of the law is exhibits the statute and says, unless y'all got a reason to stay, y'all got to go, and y'all got to go now. Now, what the alleged intruders are allowed to do is they're allowed to right then and there swear out a counter affidavit saying everything he says is lies. He sold it to me. I got a quitclaim deed. It's mine. And they are authorized by the law, and what the law envisions is they would execute an affidavit right there. To that end, the deputy sheriff is even authorized to swear them right then and there to administer the affidavit. The deputy sheriff, if a counter affidavit is in fact submitted, both affidavits are filed in the Superior Court, and the Superior Court handles it, as the current statute says, with the possibility of a jury trial. I think to use lawyer terms, the original affidavit functions as the original pleading, like the complaint, and the counter affidavit functions as the answer. And the judge sometimes and jury decide who owns the property.
And Mr. Buck, with no deadlines, right?
There are no deadlines.
Whereas in evictions and dispossessories, you have 7 days to answer.
Right.
And then you have a very prompt trial after that, right? If an answer's filed.
With respect, you're absolutely right.
In magistrate court.
Right, but with respect, the way the statute, the ejectment statute originates, the proceeding against intruders for ejectment, I suspect that basically the sheriff is expect, the deputy sheriff who executes it is expected to say, okay, unless you've got to tell me a reason why you should stay, you got to go right now. So the law envisions the alleged intruder actually swearing an affidavit right then in response, right there in the presence of the right there in the
under 441132. That affidavit goes to Superior Court to a jury trial under present law. The text of the statute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And these squatters are filing an answer and getting in line for a jury trial.
Right.
Is that correct?
Well, that I don't know. That's not my side of the house. Dispossessory proceedings are my side of the house.
How many squatters have you encountered in the last year or two in Fulton County? Situations with squatters.
I couldn't give a number, but we encounter a lot.
South Fulton City Council member contacted the courthouse, and I think it was over 200 in a recent time period of squatters under the intruder statute. Is that a fair number?
I couldn't dispute you, and I bet you're correct.
Okay.
All right, that's all the questions I see. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Appreciate your input. You want to come up, Betsy?
I'll be so quick. You can find me.
Just introduce yourself and then tell us what.
Yeah, of course. Hey, Betsy Bradfield with the Georgia Association of Realtors. We are fully in support of this bill. I understand your concerns with some of the mechanics, and often, the devil is in the details. But I would just like to urge you that this is a huge problem for my members, for my property manager members. It's a serious issue. People are purchasing homes and then having to get these people out and potentially losing their home because they can't pay the mortgage, right? So it's a huge issue. It's just straight up theft of property, and however we can get this done, we appreciate all of you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for hearing this. Thank you, Representative Seabaugh and Representative Reeves, for working on this. We are here, but I appreciate you and just urge you for some action on squatters. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, we're coming up on day 28, crossover day. So we got a couple of weeks. We still have time to work on this and get things worked out, but we're not going to take a vote on this today. I think it needs some work. So. Yes, sir.
Are we done?
Well, just about. Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm waiting on you.
I just want to thank the committee for the hearing. It's been a great discussion. It's a very serious problem that I think we can get to the bottom of it with a little more discussion, and we'll fix this bill and we'll get it back and hopefully have another hearing within a week.
Yeah, we'll get right on it when you get it back to us.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Okay. Representative Kelly, you have a bill? Yes, sir. Hang on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you House Bill 1203, bipartisan piece of legislation aimed at trying to address a problem we just heard, is that there's a shortage of people who are able to assist with these dispossessories. In creating the avenue to maybe enlist some more individuals into the process that are willing to do that. Not forcing anyone to do that, but if individuals are willing to, this would provide an avenue that if the sheriff, constable, or marshal is unable to schedule the execution of the writ within 30 days from the landlord's application or request for such execution, it allows the landlord to utilize at their own cost an off-duty sheriff, constable, or marshal from that jurisdiction where the premises is at the sole cost and expense of the landlord. It says that the sheriff, the constable, or the marshal, should they choose to, shall maintain a list of authorized off-duty sheriffs, constables, or marshals, and make them available to landlords so they'll know who those are. And then finally, it just says the landlord will give a written notice to that law enforcement officer of the date and time of the execution of the rent, at least 5 calendar days in advance of such execution, so that law enforcement officer, the applicable law enforcement officer, can note the same within their own records. Pretty straightforward, Mr. Chairman, trying to deal with the issue we just heard, that there's only so many hours in the day and so many employees that are willing to do it, so trying to just provide a outside alternative.
All right.
I know there's some people that are here to speak and hours late, but I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Kelly, I know we talked offline about about potential change in line 46, but during your presentation, a question came to my mind. Truly a inquiry question here. On lines 39 to 40, it speaks in terms of if the sheriff, constable, or marshal is unable to schedule the execution of writ within 30 days. I'm wondering if you mean is unable to execute, and we make that more clear, because otherwise, how do you know if someone's like, oh yeah, I can't get to it? That means you couldn't schedule it, like maybe execute the writ within 30 days. And I was wondering if that is your intent, and if it is, maybe we could easily make an amendment.
Yeah, no, my intent is to execute.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we'll have some. Maybe,
You said schedule. I had the same question.
Yeah.
I thought you said schedule, and then you have the landlord will provide written notice to show that it hasn't been scheduled. I think that's what you were trying
yeah,
to do.
I think on line 40 is where I did say schedule.
Right.
I wonder if you could just say is unable to execute the writ.
Right, isn't it? Right.
Yes, I agree with you there.
Okay. So they have to wait 30 days before they can do this?
For her. Yes, and I think I think I'm on the same page with you there. I know there's going to be others who practice in this area more than I do that I'd like to get their input on it as well, that are going to be testifying, I believe, today.
Representative Oliver.
This offers a real solution to the problem we've been talking about. And I'm ready to make a motion that will give us an opportunity to make amendments whenever the chairman allows.
Second.
Hang on.
I appreciate y'all's enthusiasm.
Representative Hahn.
And the kind words.
So is it, and I had the same question as Representative Evans, so is it your intent to say that the landlord will have, after the writ of possession has been issued, you want the landlord to wait 30 days, and if the sheriff cannot execute the writ after that 30 days, then they can utilize a non-sheriff? Was that your intention?
I think my intention is once you get the writ of possession, if you talk to the applicable law enforcement officer and they cannot say that they will execute it within 30 days, then it allows for you to go to the alternative law enforcement officer.
Correct, and I thought that that's what you meant, because, and so therefore I think schedule the execution would stay, and so as soon as you realize that you cannot schedule the execution of the writ within 30 days, then you would have the option to go off duty or, list of others. And I think given the bill, you are also providing that there has to be a written notice. And I may offer an amendment to that effect, as far as maybe doing a written notice to show that you were not able to get a execution of the writ scheduled within 30 days, and so therefore you want to utilize this other option. I think that's what, is that what your intention
yeah,
was?
You're tracking my intention.
Who's 13? Representative Oliver? Or no,
No,
Chairman
that's me,
Smith,
Chairman.
sorry.
Just to understand Floor Leader Hong, this is basically to also help perfect the record going up as well. Would you see that as a plus to your proposed amendment as well?
Correct.
Okay.
I think it serves two purposes, right? So that all of a sudden the sheriff doesn't go out there and waste their time after an off-duty person, but also, like you said, to keep the record clean.
Okay. All right, that it? All right. Ms. Apley, I didn't call on you on the other one. You're listed to talk on this one. Would you like to come up? And do you have other folks with you? Cole
No,
Thayer and
they were unable to meet our delayed schedule, I'm
Okay.
sorry. So, Mr. Chairman, I represent Presbyterians for Better Georgia, Georgia Advancing Communities Together, Enterprise Community Partners, House ATL 9 to 5 on these issues, and we look forward to participating in the discussion on the other legislation. And we do not oppose this legislation. We want landlords to be paid. We want the writs to be properly executed. We would ask for you to consider what we have now is with these long delays, people don't know when the writ is going to be executed, when the set out is going to occur. And so the sheriff shows up or the marshal shows up in the middle of dinner, and this means the property gets put out on the street. People don't have a place to go that night. The lieutenant just recounted the range of horrors that people face. And so since the landlord is going to be providing notice here to the sheriff, constable, or marshal, we would ask for your consideration of an amendment that the landlord also provide notice to the tenant, so that also would have the added benefit of giving them, we understand they knew they were subject to an eviction, but to give them one last chance to leave before the set out occurs and avoid having the property set out on the street, maybe have some place to leave, and to self-execute, so that then you would actually avoid the need for the set out to be performed officially.
Okay. Representative Kelly.
I would just ask, what we're trying to deal with here is not additional notice. What I think the issue we're trying to deal, and I think there's other bills pending in the legislature that deal with some additional notice requirements for evictions. Am I right there? Maybe one passed the Senate Judiciary last night.
So that House Bill 404 provides for notice prior to eviction filing.
So that's going to be an increased notice that a landlord has to give, correct?
Well, some landlords give more than what's required by that bill as a matter of course now, but it's to
Builds the floor up.
We're not. My suggestion, Mr. Chairman,
Right. No, I'm
not
just
to
trying to
extend the time period, but to give the same notice that's going to the marshal to the tenant, so that they can avoid the trauma of a set out, not to delay the performance of the set out.
So here's what I'm envisioning, though, because this was really just meant to be a alternative workforce issue. Today, if you have a plethora of sheriffs, marshals, constables who are just sitting there able to do writs all day long, they don't have to give an additional notice to the tenant, correct?
There's no requirement of notice. Some
So
do.
because you're already asking the landlord here to go through an effort to try and schedule with law enforcement, the original law enforcement officer. They've now had to go out and hire an alternative law enforcement officer at their own expense. And now you're going to make them do additional requirements just because an agency is not staffed properly to do the job we've asked them to do. So I'm asking, why is that? Why? I'm trying to understand here. I understand the scenario, but if we're not making them do that on a situation of when the original officer is going to do it, why now are we placing an additional burden on the landlord who's already taken on an additional burden to go hire an off-duty officer? Just Help me understand that. Evictions are horrible. I agree with me, and you have spent a lot of hours in this room trying to make that process more friendly to tenants. A lot later at night than we are right now.
So we would love to see a notice requirement in law, and we're not trying to delay, and I don't think this amendment would delay the carrying out of the execution, and it's precisely what you just described. An eviction set out, the sheriff or marshal coming in the middle of dinner with no notice. We know people understand they're subject to an eviction, but time has passed. There's testimony today that months have passed.
They've already got to stay longer than they were supposed to.
These are people who are desperate, okay? It's not a pretty situation, and 5 days is going to avoid the prospect of their property being put on the street and lost. They're having no place to put it and nowhere to go that night. And we don't want the notice to be burdensome to the landlord. If it's we can say telephone call or email or text, just to ameliorate and help to avoid the necessity of a set out. Let the people go, get their last chance warning.
What happens in your mind if, when they send that notice, the off-duty officer runs over a nail in the middle of the road and his tire goes flat, and he doesn't show up at 6 o'clock when they're eating dinner that night, or at 12 o'clock when they were supposed to be eating lunch when they originally noticed, and they show up at 6 o'clock that night for dinner?
I don't read this, as requiring, there has to be at least 5 days calendar notice in advance. That's the part that I'm focusing on.
So you're saying,
if you'd want to take out the date and time and just say give them at least 5 days advance notice, that would also be of value to achieve the goal that I'm describing.
I'm struggling with it. Okay, thank you.
All right. No other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I've got Mike Williams and Jay McGinnity from the Georgia Apartment Association.
Mr. Chairman, Jay McGinnity went on the IL, but we brought in John Nixon to come up, and if it's okay, I'd like to join them.
Yes, yes. Y'all come on up. You may have to share that mic there.
No problem. Thank you very much. I'll ask that Mike and John quickly introduce themselves and their background. My name is Hayden Stanley. I represent the Georgia Apartment Association. We appreciate this bill. We appreciate the hour, some enthusiasm over here to get it done, so we don't want to delay that. I would say at the outset, though, that I believe we would resist an amendment to add additional notice in this. That creates a new footfall to an already very difficult situation after many, many months. So with that, if I could just ask you boys.
Sure. John Nixon, Chief Operating Officer of First Communities, now Asset Living, probably the largest apartment manager in Atlanta, Metro Atlanta. Not going to go into the detail of how we got here from where we at in the point of this particular bill as far as the eviction process, but just to reiterate the need for the challenges that we have in this piece, being that, you know, when it gets to this point, as was mentioned multiple times, we're talking over 6 months in a lot of these counties, especially in the metro area. And, you know, this is an area that appreciate you all taking a close look at, and as was discussed earlier in the previous bill, it truly is a manpower issue. And this is really what we're trying to do. We're trying to help find a solution to execute the writs that have legally been done, and we're at this point to just get that process moving forward. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I know there'll be some others as well, and I'm happy to answer questions, but again, appreciate the effort to move this bill forward.
All right. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Mike Williams. I've been here before. I know many of you. I am legal counsel for the Atlanta and Georgia Apartment Association. I also have been practicing law 30 years in this area. I specialize in the multifamily apartment industry. I have single-family owner clients as well, and do some commercial litigation as well. This is an area that's all too familiar with me. We have an eviction crisis in the state, especially in the metro Atlanta. It takes 1 year to get somebody out in Fulton County. And even in Gwinnett County, which is a great county, to get into court and obtain the writ, we have a substantial backlog of cases. We're waiting on execution of the writs. And that seems to be the biggest backlog and problem that we're facing and that we're seeing, even down in Columbus and Macon area. I talked to some clients down there, and they're waiting a substantial amount of time to get their writs executed. So we believe that this bill will substantially help in that process, and we ask that you fully support it. I do want to talk about a little bit of the details that y'all were talking about earlier, and I'll kind of mention it. There's no real scheduling of the writ. So to understand how this works, when you apply for the writ of possession as a landlord, the court looks at it, makes sure the writ's in order, either no answer was filed or there's an order granting a writ of possession. That writ then gets signed. In some counties throughout the state, a request is simply made, and that's why the request language is in here. The writ then goes to the marshals or the sheriff's office for execution. Even though they schedule it, they're not very communicative of when that scheduling is going to occur. It's a matter of, and for various reasons. I mean, if you think about it this way, they don't want to tell somebody when they're coming, the date and time, for security reasons. They show up on a particular day, and the tenant knows about it. If it's a bad guy, so to speak, I'll use the word bad guy, bad actor, then you're putting them in danger. And so there is no real scheduling. They notify our clients 24 to 48 hours before they're coming in many instances to verify that the crew's ready to go and so forth. So I would encourage you to use the execution language instead of scheduling of the execution. And the reason why, it's not really hard to document, because the application or the request is filed with the court. And so the time, the 30 days would start to tick from the date that the application or the request is filed with the court and signed by the judge. So that's not very hard to document, sort of track out 30 days if the marshal cannot execute it. And I'll tell you right now, there isn't a county in metro Atlanta that's executing a writ in 30 days. If we got a writ executed in 30 days, I'd be shocked. You're talking a substantial amount of time. It could be 100, 120 days or longer in many of these counties to get. It's important because there's no real scheduling, and it's just a matter of how the process works. And, you know, to give another notice, the purpose of the notice section here, I agree with the analysis on this, is to provide the sheriff with notice that the writ's going to be executed, so they can take it off their books. They can remove that writ from their pile, and they don't have to worry about it. They are severely understaffed. This is a big problem. It was already taking a while pre-COVID, and the problem has only gotten worse. And we commend you for coming up with this. This is certainly going to help our industry. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the process.
All right. Representative Oliver.
I agree that it has to be implementation instead of scheduling. Do you advise your clients to make the request for the application after 30 days have elapsed for appeal?
No, because there's 7 days in a dispossessory proceeding, and we do apply for the writs. Usually, because if they show up for court, they're going to get at least 7 days anyway.
Under the new appellate procedure, that's what I'm trying to remember.
It's still 7 days to file the petition for review. So we will not apply for the writ until the appeal time runs. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Hong.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know where my copy was. I'm going to go back to the scheduling and execution. So it is my understanding that once a writ has been issued, the landlord will call the sheriff's office or the marshal's office, and they're usually told, hey, the next one is in 2 months. Next one is in 4 months. But we'll call you and/or we'll call you if there's some other time comes up, but you're looking at about 2 months, 4 months. So, I mean, the whole purpose of this, us doing this, is to make sure that we have landlords who have been issued a writ of possession to be able to get possession of their property. So why do you think that they should still wait the 30 days, even though they're hearing it's going to be 4 months?
I don't. I think they should be able to do it personally.
Okay.
But if you're trying to make it easy and uniform to track, the easiest way to do that is from the actual writ application or the request, as opposed to then submitting an affidavit or something that says, I talked to the marshal and they said it's not going to happen for 3 or 4 months. I'm just saying that makes it, not every county does it the same way either. So there's not everybody schedules it. There's no, I agree with you. I think you should be able to go ahead and do it right away. But if you're trying to create a simple to understand and way to track it, the way to do it, the operative date would be from the day of the application of writ of possession or the request. I don't disagree that if you call them and they say, well, it's going to be 3 or 4 months, and you're correct, they will tell you that. And it may not be April or May. They're not going to give you a set date. I don't like the idea that we got to wait 30 days, but at least we've got a timeline. At least we know what we can do if we can't get it executed in 30 days. I'd like for it to be right away, but.
All right, Representative Kelly.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around 2 concepts. One, I think we just kind of got into that, and there'll be some conversation maybe if we get into amendments. But maybe the second issue is just where we're looking at that line 45, 47, 45 through 49. Maybe some language where we would, kind of strike the 5 calendar days in advance and that sort of thing. Because all we really want them to know is that, hey, we're using somebody else, right? They don't care. At that point, when the sheriff or the regional law enforcement officers, I call them, all they need to know is, hey, somebody else is handling this. Don't worry about it. That's all we really need there, right?
Yeah, you're not going to need the 5 days because these are going to get scheduled. If you're able to get a law enforcement officer in your jurisdiction to do the set out, it's going to be way before the sheriff or marshal in that county could do it.
All right, that's just something I kind of want to get clarity on. Should we get a motion to move the bill forward and then start getting into amendments? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me.
All right, Representative Silcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at line 40, I wanted to eliminate that language that you didn't like. So I would assume you'd want us to say, starting at the end of 39, or marshal is unable to execute the writ, right? And just eliminate to schedule.
That's correct. That's
okay.
what I think would be.
Okay.
I think it would take the ambiguity out of what that scheduling means.
Okay.
Because then you'd have to add additional language, something to the fact that, we tried to call and they couldn't get it scheduled till April, and you got to submit an affidavit.
Sure.
This would be a simpler way of doing it. Yes, you have to wait a little bit longer.
Okay.
And I'm sure John can speak on this from the owner-operator standpoint, but at least we're not going to have a judge saying, well, what's the scheduling, what you do,
Okay.
and we take the ambiguity out of it.
Thank you.
Exactly right, yeah. Just looking to speed the process up, getting it.
Representative Silcox, you still want to ask something? All right. All right, that's all the questions I see.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
All right. Jim Borders. And Lieutenant Buck, I've got you down and opposed to this also. I'll get back to you in just a second. Go ahead, sir. Introduce yourself and give us your statement on it.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Borders, and I live in Fulton County and own one completed and one near complete apartment community here. both of which have big problems with evictions. I was also in at a conference last week of the whole industry, and in every one of the meetings in the industry, they want to talk about two things: what's the Fed doing with interest rates, and what's the story in Fulton County with evictions, because people do not want to invest in our county because we have a backlog. And so we are in favor of the legislation. I had a couple of comments to the language on it, and the first is obviously I do think that the execute language, Representative Silcox, is that's right, because they could say, hey, we've scheduled it, but it's going to be 6 months, and now we wouldn't have a remedy. The second thing I would say is that I personally think that 30 days is a long time. We've already gone through a process. They didn't pay the rent on the 1st. We waited and worked with them, for several days to try to get them to pay. Didn't pay. Filed the court case in magistrate's court. It's probably going to take a while to get to the point of having a hearing. So we've already waited a long time. And then the writ is issued. I believe, Mr. Williams, it's like 8 days before, right? 8 days before the writ's going to actually be executed. So you already got 8 days there. So now we've got another 30. I mean, I would argue that the 30 days should be 15 days, so that and the bottom line is if this gets passed, then because of the undercapacity issue we have in the marshal's office, not only in Fulton County but in other counties, landlords are going to utilize this and certainly praise this bill. And so that's one thing. The other thing I would say is I believe that the word deputy should be included in in line 42 where it says sheriff. I'm not sure whether the Georgia statutes make sheriff and deputy, whether that's the same thing, but there's some other code sections like that have the word deputy and sheriff in them, so it makes me think that we should do deputy as well there. And then the other thing that I would ask for your consideration on is to add another party that could execute the writs, and for that to be an authorized and duly trained law enforcement officer, which would bring in, for example, the local police department in that jurisdiction in terms of their off-duty officers as well, as long as they've been duly, one, authorized by either the marshal, the sheriff, or the constable, so that they could be on that list, and to add the language that they would be duly trained, because obviously you need to be trained in the execution of dispossessories.
So instead of saying sheriff, it would say off-duty law enforcement officer.
Well, I would actually say off-duty sheriff, constable, marshal, or other authorized and duly trained law enforcement officer, just to add a catch-all to that. And I think maybe there was some other legislation maybe coming. Maybe there's some other legislation that's being considered that included APD in that legislation. I'm not sure.
All right.
And you want a deputy in that list as well?
Yes, I thought
Okay.
the word deputy should be in the list as well.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I don't see any questions.
Yes, thank you so much for considering this.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, Lieutenant Buck, I told you I'd give you an opportunity on this. Wait a minute. Hold on. Yeah. Oh, okay. We'll get to that in a second. Come on up.
I'm going to tell the ultimate lie. I'll be brief.
Yeah.
I've been asked by my agency head, my appointing authority, to oppose the bill, not because we oppose this in practice, in principle. We don't oppose it at all in principle. I personally think it's a great idea. It's the best way it benefits everybody. It'll help break up the backlog. Just the concern that I had about it is this: we have to make sure that the agency retains control over the process. That yes, it is an extra job. It is an extra job that a deputy might work, on Saturday, for the sake of argument. But because of the issues of ethics, professionalism, and people's rights involved, there should be an explicit statement that the agency that employs the deputy, the deputy marshal, deputy sheriff, or constable still retains control over the person and retains control over the process. Also, an interesting point was raised about advance notice. We always, as a matter of practice, give a courtesy notice before we go out. It's not required by law, but it's something we do, and it's something no doubt we would continue to do were it our deputies working this as a side job, working this as an extra job, and it could be ensured by the marshal maintaining administrative control over her deputies.
Okay. All right, I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any discussion by the committee? All right, do I hear a motion? All right, got a motion and a second. Do we have any amendments? And Representative Hong.
I'd like to offer an amendment on line 40 to strike to schedule the execution of and replace it with unable to execute. And then on the same line, 40, strike 30 days and replace it with 14 days. And we're going to count for time to appeal, et cetera. So I think that's why that I'm offering that. And then line 42, after constable deputy, sheriff's deputy.
Maybe sheriff's deputy, constable, or marshal.
What he just said. Sheriff's deputy, and after marshal or other trained law enforcement officer.
Is that a defined term? Or
Should be certified.
Or should be like post-certified?
Yeah, post-certified.
Post-certified.
Mhm.
Instead of trained, insert post-certified.
Mhm.
These are just to apply, so I don't have to change those.
I was looking at that.
These are to apply for.
Yeah, but in this one though, to execute written position within.
They don't have to do it, and if they don't do it, that's why we're doing it.
Okay, all right.
I just take that out. And then lastly, on line 47, to strike, well, on line 47, we're also going to include the same language that we did with sheriff's deputy, and other post-certified in law enforcement. And then strike on line 47 and 48, strike at least 5 calendar days in advance. Is the amendment that I'm offering, Mr. Chair.
Representative Kelly.
I would take that as a friendly amendment, and I would second it.
I have an amendment to the amendment at the appropriate time.
Well, can I, clarification, Chairman?
Go ahead. No, he's talking. I don't know. He's talking. All right. Go ahead.
So we're,
When you start
on
adding all this.
47, we're adding after the word sheriff's deputy, and then after marshal or other post-certified law enforcement officer. And then we're striking at least 5 calendar days in advance of such execution.
Yes. Basically making it.
Just in advance. So basically, we're saying that we're not putting a date. You just need to make sure that you give a notice of the execution, but we're not
I understand,
specifically.
but I think you've got of such execution printed twice in that sentence. I don't think you need it the second time, do you?
At least,
The land shall provide written notice to the
Or
sheriff, blah, 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 the
marshal.
date and time of the execution of the writ by such sheriff, of such execution.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay,
you
okay,
need
gotcha.
strike of the date and time as well.
So on line 46,
On 46, strike of the date and
of
time.
the date and time,
And on 48, of such execution.
correct, okay. So it will read, starting at 45, the landlord shall provide written notice to the sheriff, constable, or marshal of the execution of the writ by such off-duty sheriff, sheriff's, deputy sheriff, constable, or marshal, or post-certified law enforcement officer in order to permit the sheriff, constable, or marshal to note the same within their own records.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that's, that, I second that amendment.
Okay, all right,
Amendment to the amendment at the appropriate time.
okay, now.
On the current line 45, after the word landlord, but before the period, and shall maintain administrative authority over any person executing writs under this section.
Authority over who again?
Such persons executing writs under this section.
So I think a friendly amendment to that is we're just going to need that same tracking language of the deputies, post-certified law enforcement officers on 44 and 45 as well.
I think that's right.
Yeah. I count that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Is everybody clear on the amendments? Because if I try to go back through this, we may be here another half hour. I think I know what everybody's got, so, all right. Any further discussion? All right, let's, I'm gonna take a vote on the amendments, and we're gonna do them as a whole.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Fine with
Everybody
that.
clear with that?
Everything we said.
Everything we said, because they all seem to be acceptable. All right. So, all those in favor of the amendments proposed to House Bill 1203, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the amendments that we discussed, and I think we're going to be able to compile this together so that we have it. All right, now it moves us to the main bill. Any further discussion? Any other amendments? All right, all those in favor of the passage of House Bill 1203 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the bill passes. Okay, good. And that's the last one, Representative. You got another?
I'll do it in a minute.
Are you gonna do it for Jones?
Less than a minute.
Okay.
No, the 620 is the one that got recommitted.
Oh, 628. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, House Bill 628, the bankruptcy exemption schedule, was recommitted upon request. We got some additional feedback from bankruptcy practitioners. This amended bill has an individual homestead of $35,000, a homestead for a couple of $60,000, and it requires that the couple live together. Those were some numbers and an amendment from.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any discussion about the bill or any questions about the bill? Representative Holcomb.
Yeah, I want to understand it. Can you explain why?
Absolutely. We got some contact from a bankruptcy trustee and some other creditors' counsel after we passed it the rules. We got back in touch with Jason Braswell, who testified at length. He hashed it out with them. As you remember, he had data from a lot of other states. He thought those numbers that were negotiated by the creditors' representatives fit in well with North Carolina and other states. the issue about residing together, sometimes you have situations where a married couple may have been separated for long periods of time. So if you get that enhanced homestead, you need to be living together to get the benefit of it. If both people declare bankruptcy, then you have $70,000. That's why it doesn't double. If you have somebody who individually declares bankruptcy, but they are a married couple, you get the $60,000. That fits in well with homestead exemption landscape nationally.
Okay. And remind me that the intent is to make it so that the basis keeps people in their homes.
Absolutely.
Ultimately?
That's right.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thanks.
All right, Representative Kelly.
I'll just move to pass, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right, motion made and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Bill passes.
Thanks a lot.
All right, we're adjourned.